While we just do a little change of technology here, I would like to highly encourage you, all of you, if only to join the local chapter, if you're not joining all of Informs. As everyone starts putting up their hand and saying, I know analytics, you're going to find a lot of posers out there. I'm sure you've met them. They can barely put they can add 2 cells together in Excel, so they put I know analytics on their resumes. This is where you're going to find that community of peers, and where if you're hiring, if you're looking for direction, this is where you're going to be able to get those leads to find the good people, not the ones just putting up their hands saying, oh yeah, I know analytics. Having said that, if you're looking for an analytically deep talk tonight, this is not the place to be. I will thank you for allowing me to do what is a slightly modified reprise of a talk I gave last fall at the Minneapolis conference. Now, for those of you who know me, I tend to move around a little bit and like to get animated. Certainly, if you have questions and want to interrupt along the way, I'd be glad to hear it. But really what I want to take you on is a little bit of my own personal journey on, with analytics and operations research. I really believe that analytics is opening up the door for operations researchers like it never has before. Finally, we have more data than we know what to do with. We have industry asking us to solve their problems, and I know I think the majority of you here are from industry. Can we just do a little show of hands? Industry, come on, don't be shy. Industry, academics, how many we have academics? Wow, I'm used to it really being the other way around, so that's great. Community of peers. And finally, we can go to that cocktail party and tell people what we do, and we're actually cool. You know? I fell in love with operations research as a 19-year-old mathematics student. I was studying math at Acadia University, which is a small liberal arts school in Canada just outside of Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I wound up going to a conference called What's a Mathematician Like You Doing in a Place Like This? It was held at Bentley College, which is just outside of Boston. And my peers, my friends were like, I want to be the math teacher. I want to be an actuary. And I was somewhat of a nonconformist. So I went to the department chair and I said, you know what, I'll just go to the ones that no one else is covering. So he said, okay, let me do your schedule for you. Sent me on my way. Well, that's when I met a guy named Steve. Steve was a couple years younger than me, sort of a nice-looking, nerdy guy, trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. Turned out he was the star character in a movie that was scripted by a brain trust from the Informs community called Operations Research plus You equals an exciting career.
This is incredible. Before today, I had no idea operations research even existed, and now I can think of a million ways in which it can be used. Even at Burger Heaven where I work, Wally, my manager, is always having problems trying to figure out how many French fry machines to keep going at one time, and how many employees to keep on any one shift, and how many super burritos to keep frozen, and wow, this is intense! Wait until I tell him about this. I actually can't think of anywhere on the face of the earth where management science doesn't apply.
You liked those shorts, didn't you? Search it on YouTube. You can actually see the full video. Well, despite this cheesy video, I was hooked. I mean, here was a field of mathematics that could be applied to any discipline, that could save me from a life of, high school students or calculating life expectancies for an insurance company. And it could be applied to absolutely any domain. So in my head, I went home jazzed and energized about a possible career and future, and I couldn't understand why everybody wouldn't be saying, I should be using this because it can be applied anywhere to make better decisions. Well, guess what? Now they are. In 2007, my friend and author, Tom Davenport, wrote a book. Well, first it started off as an HBR paper. It was the most reprinted HBR paper ever, I think still to date, that then was turned into a book, 2007, and this is what started the craze. We even saw, as part of this, Tom really challenged CIOs to take control of their analytical future and really start driving companies in that direction. And they did. In 2008, we saw business intelligence applications rise to #1 in Gartner's annual CIO report. We also saw Accenture come back and see that 2/3 of companies believed that they needed analytical capabilities to improve their business. By 2010, Gartner actually changed business intelligence to say analytics because they'd seen the topic increase so much in their research. At the same time, information technology was also going through a revolution. We were seeing an increase in speed. It was certainly becoming a lot less expensive. And new technologies were entering into the space, from map-reduce technologies to in database and in-memory analytics, and things like data virtualization. The data was changing as well. We saw the availability of storage increase. Unstructured data is outpacing structured data 4-to-1. And data got bigger, flatter, and up in the cloud. And today the world is a different place. I mean, can you imagine seeing this type of landscape even 10 years ago? I mean, it's crazy. They're projecting that by 2020, the amount of storage that will be required for the data being created is 35 zettabytes. That's 10 to the 21 bytes of data. And the number of applications to take that and transform that to intelligence is increasing at a similar rate. IDC, wound up having some conversations with them. They came back and told us their predictions on spend for analytical type software, hardware, and services. So they're expecting by 2017 for this to continue growing to be in about $150 billion US globally. Even Obama has been in on it, right? Committed to spend $250, and I know this is the community that knows much more about this topic than I do, $250 million annually, with no less than 10% of it being put towards new ideas and new concepts as part of their development. So talent is really what's become the shortage. I think probably many of you have seen this, right? The sexiest job of the 21st century. Well, guess what? Classes, schools are taking notice. They're creating programs dedicated to this. Indeed.com has seen a 15,000% increase in the number of job postings that are asking for business analytics, business intelligence jobs since 2011. McKinsey, not only did they comment on the shortfall of analytical talent, but in particular they commented on the shortfall of people who are going to have the ability to manage analytical talent. And I'd say many of you in this room probably fall into that category. It's hard to understand, how do you find somebody who has that need to be coached rather than directly managed per se, and be able to add value while giving them enough creativity and flexibility to explore the different analytical paths that you may have to take. And finally, Gartner's, by 2015, and this was a statistic from last year, they said at that point there were 4.4 million data scientist roles that were opened up globally, and they figured by 2015 only a third of those would have been filled. And I know myself, I've had a job for a data scientist open for 2 years, and we had 2 of them open. I managed to fill 1 in the last 6 months. That other one still sits open. Now, I'm in New Jersey, in the land of pharma and finance, so those guys tend to suck people away, but it's amazing. It's amazing, and I'm sure many of you are feeling that pain around trying to hire talent as well. In fact, some companies have gone so far as tracking students through their graduate career the same way that a sports team might track a professional athlete. So I'm thinking somebody needs to come up with this book. This is really our time. For those of you who are studying any flavor of operations research, now's the time to be able, more so than in 2007 when the conversation started. Companies have made big investments in big data platforms. We're hearing the topic everywhere. They've spent the money, they've put in those foundations, and now they're like, now what? Right, what do I do with this? Realizing that there's statements out there like this about outperforming the S&P by 64%, that's significant. Companies have taken notice, they've made that investment. This is our time, even more so than back then. So let's just take a step back for a moment and just make sure everybody's on the same page. So according to Informs, and hopefully this is a definition that everybody is well familiar with, analytics is defined as the scientific process of transforming data into insight for making better decisions. And according to the membership survey from last year, 86.3% of people agree with this definition. I'll tell you, this did my heart well because this took us a really long time. I'll tell you a little hint though. The characteristic of operations researchers, you know, we really like details and get into the weeds, and every time we put a definition up, everybody's, oh, no, don't like it, don't like it. So I decided to say, are you 80% content with this definition? Can you live with it 80%? Oh, 80%, absolutely, no problem. And finally, we got consensus on the definition of analytics. So I like that we used a quasi-analytical process to get there. And we did do a survey of the membership to say, okay, so what do you think the relationship is between operations research and analytics? And this is what it came out to. About 50% of the people believe it is similar but not the same, with a heavy overlap. 25% said OR is a subset of analytics. Another quarter said analytics is a subset of OR. Some people said it's absolutely one and the same, and 3% said, I don't know what you're talking about, leave me alone. Interesting if you can compare that to 2011 when we asked the same question, and you can see how much it has shifted towards this sort of shared domain, realizing there may be some space that's not entirely overlapping, but that's really the predominant thought. One thing that was very high on everybody's list was that analytics does help improve decision making in organizations. So when we talk about the analytics disciplines, certainly we all know the standard ones, right? I come from the supply chain space. That's my world at Verizon, working on inventory optimization. We've all been there. That's the textbook. Making the right investment. We're talking about the finance world. Picking the right marketer, deciding the best treatment. We certainly have, over the last little while, seen a big growth in healthcare. But where the analytic disciplines are even starting to emerge in areas more predominantly that hadn't historically had a lot of analytical rigor. HR. I had the opportunity about a little over a year ago, to speak to the HR Management Association of Chicago. They wanted to teach their entire membership base about analytics and the importance of becoming more analytically rigorous in not only from a call center kind of level employee, but how could you use analytics to determine strategically who was going to be the next leader of your organization. Another area which obviously makes sense that's growing in leaps and bounds, around social media analytics. We're even seeing university programs specifically dedicated to social media analytics, understanding that sea of unstructured information and being able to not only use what's being said today, but use that to predict and prescribe the direction that customers are going. And certainly when we talk about analytics, and I'm hoping that many of you have seen this before, the important thing when delivering the message about what it is through the 3 tiers, right? Descriptive analytics, what's happening, this may be your traditional business intelligence space, what's happening right now, what is that window to the world? And again, that could be through regular operations, your sort of medium-term tactical decisions, or even from a strategic perspective. Let me understand what my circumstances are right now. Whereas predictive analytics, we're starting to get into the forecasting. What will it be? Let's start looking forward. And finally, the area that's closest to all of our hearts is the prescriptive area, is given a set of circumstances, what is the best outcome? Certainly when you talk about operations research in this context, this is where you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. Gartner gave a presentation at the Executive Forum last fall. And they came back and said, according to their research, this is where you were seeing the areas. About 70% of companies are saying, we have the descriptive thing figured out. They put descriptive and diagnostic. I kind of put them all together. From predictive, only 16% of the base of people that they spoke with said that they felt that they had the prescriptive capabilities. And only 3%, and those were both rising numbers, the 16 and the 3, said that yes, we have prescriptive capabilities within our organization. So what I'm saying, and what I've been telling people recently, is that these investments in big data, the investments in the traditional business intelligence have been made. Right? We've got the data more than ever. It may not be perfect. You may not be able to link all the tables together and you're looking at a data virtualization solution, but the majority of companies have made that platform investment and they can see. So that's no longer a game changer. That is table stakes. Where you're actually going to see that differentiator, where you're going to see that next top company emerge, are the ones that can take those predictive and prescriptive analytics as a way to differentiate. And that's the message. That's why this is our time to make those moves to get more than ever, get people to understand what operations research, what predictive and prescriptive analytics can do for you. And companies are doing it, right? We've seen several from a prescriptive situation. I've a couple of examples here. The state of Arizona Border Patrol is using prescriptive analytics to understand what their workforce needs to be, how they're going to place along the Border Patrol, how many people, what times of day. They're using prescriptive analytics to understand what kind of skill sets. New York City, 21 kilometers worth of power lines under the streets of Manhattan. This equates to about 51,000 manhole covers. They decided that they wanted to understand and start predicting where extreme events were going to happen. Not just, you know, power outage or whatnot, but what could they do to prevent a massive explosion, something, an extreme event. They started looking at all of the historical data, started leveraging some domain expertise by being able to use a massive data mining activity, predicted where they should prioritize their improvement investments in the city, and have managed to, I mean, you know, it's here, so it's avoidance, right? But they've managed to, versus historically, bring down those error, you know, the probability of those extreme events has come down significantly, and this is actively ongoing. In fact, this particular group, it was a joint partnership between Con Ed and the Center for Computer Learning Systems at Columbia, and they actually won the Innovations of Applications of Analytics Award last year. This past time was actually UNICEF doing some pretty interesting text mining work as well. So it's really, these stories are getting more and more, they're having more and more attention. They're being drawn together more and more from a news perspective and on a bigger platform, but it's just the start, right? It really is just the start. I think I have one more in here about Propeller Health. I think everybody knows somebody who suffers terribly from asthma, and this equated to about $56 billion in direct and indirect costs per year in the US. So Propeller Health started putting GPS trackers on those asthma inhalers so they could start collecting information through somebody's wireless device and their inhaler, along with all the known catalysts through the Center for Disease Control. They married the information together, and based on where people were living, based on that combination of characteristics, they were able to control 50% of the participants who came into that program. They estimated the savings to be about $2,500 per patient, and if you roll that out across that particular, their insurance company, a member base, they expected about more than a $10 million savings as a result of being able to bring that. And in addition to that, imagine just the quality of life improvement for these people that are now, I mean, we know how terrible it is suffering from asthma. And these are just a handful of stories. It's just scratching the surface. At Verizon, one of the things we're noticing is more and more pockets of analytics are starting to pop up. And what we've done is, through a hub and spoke kind of system, create an analytics center of excellence in our organization, which allows people to no longer be sort of that isolated practitioner and have a peer group and be able to see a career path through the organization that may take you through many different domains. You can see last year we actually had our first Advanced Analytics Summit, and the current president-elect of the analytics section of Informs came in to be the speaker for that event. But that's only part of the story. You know, it's great to be able to have a big success like that, but you need to be able to have the staff to do it. And we're seeing that 50% of companies are saying, you know what, we made the investment, but we cannot get to that value because we don't have that staffing capability. One of my peers, he made an offer. He had a data scientist position, you know, went through and he interviewed all these folks, and he came down with 3 top candidates, made 3 offers. Well, the first one, they decided they want to go to SaaS. Okay. Analytics person, you want to go to SaaS, can't argue there. The second person, they had a personal commitment, they decided not to take the job. Well, the third person signed, was ready to go. 2 weeks before they were supposed to start, they called up and said they had gotten a call from the NFL to be a chief data scientist for one of the NFL teams. How can we argue with the NFL, you know? How cool is that? Of course you want to go and do that. So he's back to posting jobs and just says, yeah, he's that poster boy for all of these problems of trying to find the right staff.
When you talk about staffing problems, are you saying that there is not enough funding from the corporation to create jobs, or you're saying there's plenty of funding to create jobs, but you cannot find applicants to fill the jobs?
That's
because
it.
usually what people complain in the past is there was no money to create the jobs. Your
So
example is about not finding people to get jobs. But which one do you
It's
mean?
been about not finding the people to fill the jobs.
But there is money for
The
corporation
positions
to
are
create the
opened.
positions, yeah.
The positions are opened. The positions are there. Finding somebody with the right mix of talent, the skill, as well as communication skills and that ability to speak analytics to a non-technical audience. That combination of skills is very difficult to find. And different companies certainly have different tiers of roles that they're looking for, but it is a common complaint. I mean, that was part of the reason to create the CAP, as Lane mentioned, was to be able to find the posers and identify people who had this mix of the technical ability as well as the soft skills, so that you could help filter through. Of course, they become even a more difficult commodity to get. I mean, it's one thing to say you have the money, but the reality is that these are hot jobs, and that dollar price is going up and up and up. Which is why a community like Informs is so important. And when we see that, this demand for more insight from the data that we have, more talent from the folks that we're looking to hire from our academic community, and ultimately more value to a company, to society, whichever direction you're going, that's what we're ultimately looking for. So several years ago, and interesting that we're here at Capgemini, because it was actually with Capgemini, Informs did a big study to saying, what does analytics mean from a professional society perspective? What do we need to do to make sure we're satisfying members? And ultimately, where should we go as an organization? Should analytics be part of the Informs community? Is that really something we want to address? They came back to us with some very interesting tidbits. The perception from the outside in of operations research was it was seen as a toolbox, whereas analytics was seen as a capability. You are highly unlikely to find a C-level executive who's going to say, oh, I don't need analytics, especially not these days. Whereas operations research, if they even know the term, be, oh, yeah, that's too complicated for what we're doing here. So that was really something they came and said to us, you have the right skill set, you have the right offerings, but the package on the outside is not making people connect the dots to what it is that you're trying to deliver. That analytics is really an end-to-end process. So really from understanding the problem, being able to frame it up, choosing from your descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive toolbox, figuring out that solution and translating that back into something that a general community can understand. That Informs brought credibility to the topic. So because of the academic richness of the community, that was really something that was a benefit from an external perspective. They're seeing us as a community that does bring that top-level expertise. That the community is asking for continuing education and networking. So from there, Informs did really focus in a few different areas. One certainly was around the analytical maturity model, but really to say, how do you know where you are? How can you make your way up that analytical path? And how can Informs and should Informs service your needs at this stage in your analytical journey? The second area was around the increase in master's programs. So we're seeing not only an influx in master's programs, but within the Informs community, we've had a lot of people come up and say, well, what should the curriculum be? What does that need to look like? What should we be teaching the students? What do our practice members want to be able to get from a newly graduate of a master's in analytics, a master's in operations research, management science, decision analysis? What are they looking for? Many of these programs, so they came together. There's a group of over 50 now that they meet on a regular basis along, I forget, 3 different topic areas. One are looking at IT focus, the technical area. One is looking at curriculum, and one is looking at something else that escapes me at the moment. But these groups, we're seeing more and more interest, and not only that, they're aligning their programs back to the domains of the CAP, which I'll talk about in a minute, but to become a certified analytics professional. So the CAP was created, again, out of this need to be able to differentiate talent. We saw people mid-career. A lot of people are coming in to take the CAP are mid-career, saying, I want to show that I have the skill set and can differentiate myself from these people, again, who may be right out of the undergraduate, putting up their hands, saying they have analytic skills, have some basic Excel, but aren't necessarily differentiated, you know, not delivering what they have. So that's a big group. Really, we wanted people to understand that end-to-end analytic process and prove that they had that. So if you are interested in taking the CAP, you will have to have a former employer, speak to the fact that yes, you added value, yes, you have the soft skills, those communication skills, that ability to take a message and deliver it. And the exam takes you through 7 domains of practice, everything from starting at the data end all the way through understanding the model to model maintenance and really making sure that there's continuous use. There are details, specific details about the CAP. I believe there's some paperwork outside. And there is a discounted exam, is that right? That's being offered next week in the Informs headquarters office, which is a simple 40 minutes when you don't have traffic. If there's traffic, good luck. I can't even guess. No OR is really going to help you with that, but it is on the weekend, and it's at about a 75% discount, is that right?
Just $100, right?
Just $100. So if you have any interest in thinking about doing the CAP, this is a great opportunity. It's also gone online, as Gary mentioned, which has been a new offering for this year. Continuing education, this was also something that was asked of our community, that people wanted to be able to stay current, to stay up with new topics, to understand what it is that they might need to continue being that analytics professional. And so what we did is we contracted with, first we surveyed the internal community, external folks to understand what is the best offering we should do. And we wound up leveraging an adult education consultant to really design courses that are compelling. I don't know, has anybody taken any of the Informs continuing ed classes in this room? So the 2 that they have, one is data exploration and visualization, which is looking at improving that data skills. What we found was a lot of people are coming out of graduate programs. They've got the OR models mastered, but they've never seen dirty data. And they've never played with it, and they've never tried it. And if you have an employee like that in your organization, you know, send them to this class. The other one is essential skills for analytics professionals. People are like, oh, is that analytics 101? No, that's really that complement of soft skills. How do you have a client engagement? I'm sure many of the people here from consulting companies have something like that probably internally. This is specifically focused at analytics professionals and teaching them how to have that engagement, how to have that rapport, which is, you know, it's a challenging skill set to learn if you've never been put in that situation. So really the idea was to be able to differentiate us and have some alignment back to the CAP as well. And last but not least, one thing that started this past year was a new focus on the careers, not just for those new students, that's always been a core competency of Informs, but really creating a job market for folks like ourselves who are looking to make that change, to look for that next analytical opportunity. Or for you, if you're looking for somebody, again, who has that depth of background, this is an opportunity to go in and see there are many, many jobs and many, many resumes. But through this, we're hoping to bring all those members, those opportunities with Informs members, because as we said, this is the community that allows you to differentiate from those who are, you know, your traditional BI type of analytics people, or the ones that just are really good at Excel and are putting their hands up and applying for the same jobs as our folks with masters and PhDs in OR. So at the end of the day, whether you believe that analytics and OR are one and the same, they overlap, or they just simply interface, you can't deny that this is really a game-changing time for us. Between the different types of data, I mean, we have access to completely different types of information. We're seeing new and different types of problems, whether you have the opportunity to work on a social media analytics problem, or a workforce analytics problem, or just seeing domains cross paths in a way they never did before. In my world of supply chain, this big shift from the marketing-driven supply chain to the market-driven supply chain, and trying to bring that social media data in to figure out product demand and use that to determine supply plans. I mean, that's not in that operations management textbook I have gathering dust in my office, you know. It's a different world out there. We're driving change differently. We're the ones driving value. These really are transformative times, and I'm really glad that they're our times. And you know, if I think about Steve that we met earlier this evening, and I'm sure Steve is now the Chief Analytics Officer, probably one of your companies. I should have placed somebody in here with a name tag Steve on. You know, I think I would go back to Steve and say, it's time for a new movie. You know, let's skip the short shorts and the Mickey Mouse t-shirt. But this would likely be the title. And I can only hope that we're all in a position to take advantage. So good luck with your analytical journey. Thank you for letting me share a little bit of mine. I hope if you're not part of the Informs community, that you'll join us. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.